Hello, and welcome to Craig Safety's webinar on post-accident testing. We're very excited that you decided to join us today to learn more about this important topic. My name is Dan McDonald, and I'll be guiding us through the webinar today. If you're not familiar with Craig Safety Technologies, we are a technology company with a focus on safety, and we provide easy-to-use software solutions for companies in the transportation industry. Our cloud-based system is called Compliance Safety Manager and helps employers simplify employee hiring, managing driver qualification files, employee drug testing, and driver's license monitoring. CSM also offers employers a way to manage their vehicle assets to ensure they meet all the regulatory requirements related to your fleet. Before we get started, just a couple of housekeeping items to mention. There are some icons running along the top of your screen. If you have questions during the presentation, you can click on the icon that has the two chat bubbles and says Q&A. You can log your questions in there or respond to all the questions at the end of the presentation. If we are pressed for time, we'll go ahead and answer all the questions in writing and distribute it to everyone that's on the webinar today. We've also prepared some additional documents that are available to you. This includes a copy of this presentation and some other documents we'll be referencing in the presentation. To access those, go to the chat icon, and within the chat thread, there are links to all the documents that you can download. All right, now that we've got that out of the way, let's go ahead and dig into post-accident testing. To set the stage, our goal during this webinar is to provide you a greater understanding of the FMCSA regulations related to post-accident testing and what is required of the employer as well as the driver should the situation arise. Also, we're going to talk about the importance of having a plan when these situations occur and what elements you should include in your plan in the event of a post-accident. Planning ahead is a key component to successfully navigating a post-accident situation. So let's start by simply defining when an FMCSA post-accident test is required. And so there's two elements to consider: the type of accident and if there was a citation issued to the driver. We've got a chart here to help you. We can see on the chart in the first column defines the type of accident, and the second row indicates if the driver, or second column indicates if the driver was issued a citation. The third column lets you know if you need to initiate FMCSA testing. So in the case of a human fatality during the accident, testing is required whether the driver was cited or not. Moving down to the next type, if there is an injury with immediate medical treatment away from the accident, if the driver was issued a citation, then testing is required. If they were not cited, then testing is not required. And just a little mention there, remember this is immediate medical treatment away from the accident. So that's really implying an ambulance coming to get the person and taking them to the hospital for treatment. It doesn't cover if the driver goes to his private doctor 2 days later or 3 days later or whatever it is. Finally, if any vehicle requires a tow away and the driver is cited, again, testing is required. If there is no citation issued, then no testing is required. So that's pretty clear to understand, but you should also consider what your internal policies are on post-accident testing. For the scenarios above where an FMCSA test is not required, you may consider to test under your company policy if that is addressed within your company policy. And just remember, all that testing should be done under non-DOT chain of custody, as the testing is not an FMCSA qualified event. Moving on, let's talk about one of the main components to consider in post-accident testing: how much time you have to complete the required testing. Per the regulations, you need to complete the alcohol test within 2 hours and have the drug screen collection completed within 32 hours. Why are there such different thresholds for alcohol and drugs? The answer is pretty simple. alcohol and drugs exit the body at very different rates. For alcohol, a rule of thumb is that one beer, one shot of whiskey, one glass of wine will exit the body per hour. Of course, different factors such as the individual's metabolism or weight may impact this. The various drugs that are included in a DOT drug screen panel have a wide range of exit rates, and they can range anywhere from 1 day to a couple of weeks. And again, factors that can affect how long those drugs stay in the body include frequency and amount of use, body fat percentage, and this is especially true in marijuana, metabolism rate, hydration level, a person's age, and overall health. We can see on the slide for alcohol testing, ideally the test should be completed within 2 hours of the accident occurring. That isn't much time, which is why having a plan in place is so important. The regulations go on to say if the test is not completed within 2 hours, employers need to document why it wasn't completed and then continue attempting to complete the test. After 8 hours, the employer can discontinue attempts to test. Why is it this way? Well, after 8 hours, any relevant alcohol in the system will have exited the body. So if the employer fails to complete the test in the first 2 hours, the best practice is to document the testing status every 2 hours until that 8-hour threshold is reached. For drug screening, you have more time to complete testing because those drugs stay in the body longer. Employers have 32 hours from the time of the accident to complete the specimen collection for the drug screen. Again, if testing is not completed within the time frame, employers must document why the test was not completed. So just wanted to touch base regarding some of the extra documents we have in the chat thread for you. We do have an accident recording form that's available to you. We've got both a Word and a PDF version. You can download either one or both. But it's also worth noting that alcohol tests should be breath alcohol and drug screens are urine tests. For alcohol, the rules do say you can do an oral fluid test as the initial screen, but if that initial screen is positive, then it must be confirmed by a breathalyzer test within 20 minutes. And because of the time considerations, it's really a best practice to try and do both the initial screen and the confirmation test via breath. The last thing you want to do is to have a positive oral fluid test and no way to confirm it via breath. As I mentioned, drug screens must be urine-based. Oral fluid, hair testing are not authorized for DOT testing. Some of you may be thinking, I thought DOT did authorize oral fluid drug testing. Well, they did a couple years ago, but there's some other things that need to happen. Specifically, the DHHS, which is Department of Health and Human Services, must certify the laboratories that do the oral fluid testing. As of this time, there are no laboratories that are certified. In fact, DHHS must certify at least two laboratories. It's this way because in the event of a positive test, the donor always has the right to request a retest of the same specimen at a different laboratory. So if that comes up, there needs to be at least 2 certified labs. Finally, just to mention again, all of your FMCSA testing must be completed under DOT chain of custody. A few more compliance details that are outlined in the post-accident regulations we want to touch on. Driver availability. Drivers must be available for post-accident testing. Leaving the scene of an accident may be considered a refusal to test, and we all know refusal to test typically can carry the same ramifications as a positive test. However, there are some medical exceptions. If the driver leaves the scene for emergency medical care or is assisting with the accident, there is no penalty for that. Again, that is why documenting the situation is of supreme importance. Finally, you as the employer must make sure your drivers understand what their responsibilities are in the event of an accident and what the procedures are to follow. This is commonly done through their initial employee training, but I would also encourage you to put written instructions in the driver's cab. This can help ensure they've got those procedures close at hand and they're followed properly every time. Employers should also be ready to send that information to the driver as soon as the driver notifies them of the accident. Text or emails to their phone are a good way to disseminate that information quickly and easily. Let's spend a few minutes to talk about how law enforcement can impact FMCSA drug testing requirements. You can expect that accidents that involve commercial motor vehicles will generally always include the presence of law enforcement. And remember, law enforcement has their own set of responsibilities when dealing with an accident situation. And those activities don't necessarily go in line with the employer's priorities. Law enforcement is going to focus on documenting the circumstances of the accident, issuing tickets, making arrests, coordinating injury care, clearing the roadway, and other activities as warranted. And again, your needs may not always be in exact alignment with the law enforcement's priorities. If the driver is issued a citation, make sure you get a copy of that. It will contain at least the officer's name and what jurisdiction they represent. Usually it doesn't include the officer's phone number, but if you know the jurisdiction and the officer's name, you've got a good path to find their contact information via a pretty easy internet search. If your employee, if the circumstances allow, having the driver collect the number can make things easier. The FMCSA does have some provisions that allow the use of police-provided drug or alcohol tests. The reg says specifically, the result of a breath or blood test for the use of alcohol or controlled substances for drug use conducted by federal, state, or local law enforcement or public safety officials having independent authority for the test shall be considered to meet the requirements of this section, provided such tests conform to the applicable federal, state, or local alcohol testing requirements, and that the results of the test are obtained by the employer. So that's a lot of word salad there. Basically, what it's saying is that the test is acceptable provided the official performing the test did so in a way that meets their local standard. So let's say you've got a county sheriff or county deputy that's on scene and they're going to conduct a breath alcohol test, and their standard says you have to do X, Y, and Z to complete the test, and they do in fact do X, Y, and Z, then you should be able to use the test. If for some reason they don't follow their own procedures, that test may be unusable. Using an alcohol test conducted by law enforcement can be a good fallback solution, considering the time sensitivity of the test. Also, generally, law enforcement will conduct a breath alcohol test, which is the same test required by the FMCSA. So there's a good one-to-one correlation there. Drug screening is a little murkier, as there are a variety of testing methods available that really don't meet the FMCSA standards. So methodologies such as rapid drug screening without a lab-based confirmation, oral fluid testing, hair follicle testing are not authorized for FMCSA testing. Finally, law enforcement testing doesn't incorporate the use of a medical review officer. So because there is more time allowed to complete the drug screen, our recommendation is to avoid using law enforcement drug testing results and really only as a very, very last resort. The other part of that regulation statement says the results must be obtainable by the employer. There are no regulatory statements that forces law enforcement to provide you a copy of the results. So remember, do not use law enforcement testing as your first option to test your employee. You can't rely on it. Coordinating with law enforcement immediately after the accident is your best option to achieve the outcomes you desire. So there are a few exceptions where testing is not required. These are pretty self-explanatory. Getting in or out of a stationary motor vehicle, no testing required. Loading or unloading cargo, no FMCSA test required. Operating a passenger car or multi-purpose passenger vehicle, unless the driver is transporting passengers for hire or the vehicle is carrying hazardous materials that require placarding. In these types of scenarios, employers may test drivers under company policy, again, if your company policy addresses that. And again, if you are testing under company policy, do not use a DOT federal chain of custody form. Those tests will need to be collected under a non-DOT chain of custody form. So I think we've got a good handle on what the regulations say now. So let's talk about actually executing the test. Having a written plan is essential. It will make sure you are conducting the test in accordance with the regulations, and you will conduct the process efficiently as possible, which is very important considering the time sensitivity of completing the testing, especially the alcohol testing. Step one, make sure everyone understands their roles and responsibilities. The driver must know to notify you immediately of the accident. The clock is ticking as soon as the accident occurs. The driver must also know everything that is required of them and know that failure to follow the rules may impact them negatively. Employers, know the rules and be ready to take immediate action and follow your established procedures. Managing these scenarios in a consistent manner will benefit you. When developing your plan, there are many considerations to take. Think about the timing of the accident. Drivers on the road 24/7, 365 days a year. That means accidents can occur at any time. There needs to be a company representative available to represent the company and coordinate the testing whenever it happens. The employer should already have a plan in place of who covers these things during regular business hours, after business hours, weekends, and holidays. Each supervisor charged with managing an accident should know the regulations and be prepared to handle the situation. That's why having a written plan is essential. When formulating your plan, also consider where the accident occurs. If it's a local situation, you most likely have a clinic you work with regularly to coordinate your testing. Make sure you have those clinics, their phone numbers, their after hours phone numbers, and who the contacts are available in your plan so it's easy to contact them. Also, it's often a good idea to call ahead to the clinic and confirm they have a breath alcohol technician on duty. Typically, clinics may only have a few individuals that have this training, so making sure that they're present when your driver arrives for testing is essential. What if the testing is out of town and maybe in a remote area? That brings a whole new set of challenges. Who's going to conduct the testing? If it's an on-site event, which is not uncommon in these situations, how long will it take the collector to get there? This can be among the most challenging scenarios you'll face. Here at Craig Safety, we provide our clients a toll-free number for supervisors to call to get assistance in coordinating an out-of-town, after-hours, post-accident situation. Companies without a plan may spend a frustrating amount of time to find a clinic that is open that can provide the testing. If there are injuries involved, the employee may be transported to the hospital. If a local situation, you should have ahead of time in your plan the phone numbers, the locations of the hospital, and if you have contacts already established, who those people are. If the driver is transported to a hospital and they are out of town, you need to find out what hospital and where it is. If the driver is in such condition they can't communicate that information with you, your best option is to get that from the law enforcement that's on the scene. Most companies today are using ELDs in their vehicles. If your ELD is equipped to recognize when an accident happens and able to notify the employer of such an occurrence, make sure those notifications are going to the correct people so they can start investigating the situation, maybe even before the driver has time to contact them. So we've put together a framework for a sample response plan on the next few slides. We've divided up into 5 phases, broken out in blocks of time. There will be variances from company to company based on the size of your fleet, the type of trucks, and the type of business you do. Phase 1 occurs in the first hour of the accident. Driver responsibilities include to ensure their own safety and call emergency services. The driver needs to secure the scene. They put out their triangle alerts, flares. If they can get their car to the side of the road, they would want to do that. And the driver needs to know to notify either dispatch or a supervisor immediately. And they need to remain at the scene unless medically required. And they need to know to avoid alcohol or controlled substances after the accident. Let's touch on that last bullet there. Avoid alcohol or controlled substances directly after an accident. Seems crazy that you need to tell a driver this, but if a driver had been drinking before the accident, they may think if they start drinking after the accident, there would be no way for the employer to determine the blood, the BAC, which is the blood alcohol content, before the accident. And that does hold some merit. However, remember, employers have other avenues to approach the situation. If they did go and start drinking after the accident, that could be considered refusal to test because they're not following the rules they're supposed to be doing. For the supervisor, document the driver report. Determine if FMCSA testing criteria are met, and if they are, initiate the testing protocol. If FMCSA testing criteria is not met, but it does meet criteria within your company policy, you need to initiate testing under non-DOT chain of custody. Phase 2, testing coordination. And this should be between 1 and 8 hours after the accident. Make sure the driver remains at the scene unless medically required. If testing is required, the supervisor should follow the plan for a local testing scenario or a non-local testing scenario. And be sure to remain in contact with the driver. This is important. Communication between the driver and the supervisor helps ensure that the driver remains engaged and are doing what they should be. Phase 3, documentation and investigation. And this would normally occur between day 1 and 2. This is where the supervisor completes all the required documentation. This includes the accident register, which we have a sample document of that in the chat thread. There are links for those documents. So accident register, they need to maintain that for 3 years after the date of the accident. And that includes information such as the date of the accident, city or town and state where the accident occurred, the driver's name, number of injuries, number of fatalities, was the vehicle towed, and whether hazardous materials were released. Additionally, carriers must retain copies of all accident reports required by state for 3 years as well. Phase 4, follow-up actions. And we're looking at day 2 through 7. Driver-related activities. You need to make sure your driver is removed from safety-sensitive duties until cleared. Begin the SAT process of a positive test. Complete return to duty, and any follow-up testing you should have lined up as it's specified by the SAT. Employer responsibilities include to review the findings with your safety and compliance team. Report to the FMCSA clearinghouse if applicable, and schedule any training or disciplinary action with the driver. Phase 5, long-term compliance. And this would be after 2 weeks. And this could be more of a post-mortem about the event. Double check to make sure you have all the documentation required. If you use a system like Compliance Safety Manager, make sure all the documents are loaded into the system. And make sure you review the incident. How was it handled? Identify any problems or successes in your internal management process and adjust accordingly. That will only improve your process in the long run. So those are the 5 phases of our sample plan. Again, we've got a copy of the deck in the chat log here, so you can access that if you want to review those 5 slides and build your plan off of that. So that's wrapping up the presentation. I'm going to pivot for just a quick minute and again invite you to learn more about our services and how we help companies stay DOT compliant. Compliance Safety Manager offers a wide range of services. Highlights include an electronic employment application. We have a process called the hiring path, which helps you manage applicants as you vet them as potential employees. You can manage all your employee driver files, which include alerts and reminders of approaching renewals. We offer drug screening, random consortium services, as well as driver's license monitoring. You can also manage your vehicles in CSM, excuse me, with features such as being able to track each vehicle's maintenance schedule, maintaining service records, accident logs, roadside inspections, and more. So if you're interested in learning more, please go to compliancesafetymanager.com and hit the link to contact us. One of our friendly, experienced representatives will reach out to you and see how we can help. Also, be sure to check out our future webinars in the coming months. We have some excellent topics coming up and presenters that will help you gain greater understanding of the transportation industry and the compliance that goes along with it. Go to compliancesafetymanager.com and navigate to the webinar page to register. So I'm going to take a quick second and check the questions, see if there's any questions we can address. And I do see a number of questions that are in the queue. However, we are really kind of up against it from a time perspective. So we will be responding to all of these questions in writing, and we'll provide them to you via email after the presentation. So that being said, thank you everybody for attending the webinar today. Stay safe and have a great afternoon.